Welcome to the Sports Breakdown, episode 15. Man, oh man, do we have a story for you today. Team USA is getting ready for the Four Nations Face-Off final.
Right. Huge game.
Huge game against Canada.
Of course.
Obviously. But they're in a bit of a tough spot here.
Yeah.
With all these injuries piling up after that crazy game against Sweden.
It's a tough situation for sure. I mean, going up against Canada is always a challenge.
Always.
But when you try and do it with a roster that's missing this many guys, it's a
whole nother level.
Whole other level, yeah.
So let's break this down for our listener. Okay, first we had Brady Tkachuk.
Oh, yeah.
Slamming into the goalpost.
Oof.
Low body injury, had to leave the game.
Tough.
Then you got his brother, Matthew Tkachuk, also out with a lower body injury, but they're saying he'll be ready for the final.
Yeah, I mean, the Tkachuk brothers really bring that grit to that team.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially against a physical opponent like Canada. I mean, you think back to that first game.
Oh, yeah.
They were throwing down right from the first puck drop.
Right. I mean, you could feel the tension
out
there on the ice. And then it wasn't just the Tkachuk brothers.
No.
You've got Charlie McAvoy, their star defenseman, right? He was scratched from the Sweden game, upper body injury. But then things got a little more concerning, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, a little bit.
When the Boston Globe reported that he was actually admitted to Mass General.
That's a big red flag.
Yeah.
I mean, they're being super tight-lipped about what's actually going on.
Right.
But anytime a player's hospitalized, it raises questions.
Absolutely.
And especially with McAvoy's history of shoulder issues.
Right.
It makes you wonder.
Yeah. And then if that wasn't enough,
oh, no.
You've got Auston Matthews.
Oh, boy.
Arguably their biggest offensive threat. He also sat out against Sweden, upper body injury. And they're saying that he's even worse off than McAvoy.
Losing Matthews for the final, I mean, that would be a huge blow to that team.
Right.
He's a game changer, right? Like, he's the kind of player who can just turn the tide of a game on his own.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about what all of this means for Team USA on the ice. All right. First off, McAvoy's absence on defense. That is a huge, huge concern.
It's a big one, yeah.
Because he's not just any defenseman, right?
Right.
He's like their quarterback. He's the guy who shuts down those top lines from the other team and starts the breakout plays.
He's essential to their defensive strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, without him, they're going to have to rely on other guys like Zakharensky to step up and play a lot more minutes than they're probably used to, which could lead to fatigue. And, you know, Canada's going to try and exploit that.
Oh, absolutely. And then on top of that, you have to think about the fatigue factor for guys like Jack Eichel and Jake Guentzel, who already played a ton against Sweden because they were down so many players.
Oh, right.
Short bench, as they say in hockey.
Yep.
Which basically means, for our listeners who maybe isn't as familiar, you got fewer guys to rotate in and out.
Right.
So the ones who are playing, they get run ragged.
And a tired team is a vulnerable team.
Absolutely.
And Canada is known for their forecheck. They're relentless.
Oh, yeah.
If Team USA's legs are gone by the third period, it could be a very long night for them.
Right. So with all that in mind, how do you see Coach Sullivan approaching this? I mean, he said that they're making a contingency plan, but what does that even mean at this point?
Well, he's got a couple of options. He could roll with the guys he has.
Right.
Hope they can just gut it out, you know, and maybe play above their level.
Hope for the best.
You know, it's that next man up mentality, right? You hear about it all the time in hockey. It's about stepping into a bigger role when a teammate goes down, playing for each other, and finding a way to win.
That's the hockey mentality, right?
That's the mentality. But it's a risky strategy.
Oh, yeah.
Especially against a team like Canada.
Oh, for sure.
So the other option is that he could call up some replacements.
Right.
And that's where it gets kind of tricky because bringing in new players this late in the game, it can really disrupt the chemistry that they've already built.
Of course.
You know, the new guys might not be familiar with the system, the plays. You know how the other players move on the ice?
Right. It's a tough call.
It's a tough call. On the one hand, you need fresh bodies.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you don't want to mess with the team dynamic that got you to this point.
Right. Exactly. And then on top of all of that, you've got the mental aspect
of all
of this.
It's huge.
These guys are already facing a ton of pressure, and now they've got this added uncertainty hanging over their heads. How do you even prepare mentally when you don't know who you're going to be playing with?
Well, that's where leadership comes in, both from the coaching staff and from the players themselves.
Yeah.
You know, Coach Sullivan has to instill confidence in these guys, reassure them that they're good enough.
Right.
And they got to come up with a game plan that plays to their strengths.
Right. And then guys like Eichel and Guentzel, they need to step up as leaders.
Absolutely.
Rally the troops, make sure everybody's focused, everybody stays positive.
It's all about controlling what you can control.
Right.
They can't control who's injured,
right,
but they can control their effort, their communication, their execution.
Yeah.
And that's what they need to focus on.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about the toll this is taking on the players. Yeah. The strategic implications, the potential roster moves. But what about the players themselves? We did hear from Jack Hughes and Jack Eichel after that Sweden game. What was their take on all of this?
Well, they both put on a brave face, saying they're confident in the team, ready to battle no matter who's on the ice.
Right.
But you could see the concern in their eyes.
Yeah, I bet.
This is a huge opportunity for these guys, It's a chance to win a gold medal for their country.
Yeah.
And now they've got the massive obstacle in front of them.
It's got to be an emotional roller coaster for them.
Oh, for sure.
The excitement of the final, the disappointment of the injuries, the uncertainty of what's to come.
It's a lot to process, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've laid the groundwork for our listener.
Yeah.
But this is just the tip of the iceberg here.
You're right.
There's so much more to unpack.
We've got the media narrative swirling around all of this.
Right.
The potential for an underdog story.
Uh-huh.
The big question mark hanging over Charlie McAvoy's status.
Oh, of course.
And then there's the mental game, which we touched on a little bit.
Huge.
This is just getting started.
Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back to dive even deeper into this fascinating story.
It's funny, right? It's funny how quickly the narrative around this final has shifted.
You're talking about how everybody is suddenly painting Team USA as the underdog?
Exactly, yeah. It's the classic David and Goliath story. You got this Team USA team all banged up, missing some of their biggest stars, going up against this, mighty Canadian team.
Right.
It's a compelling story, though, for sure.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, the odds are definitely stacked against them, but I don't think anybody should count Team USA out just yet.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen them pull off upsets before.
Absolutely.
And, sometimes that underdog mentality, it can actually be a powerful motivator.
It really can.
Right? When you've got nothing to lose, you can kind of play with a certain freedom, a recklessness almost.
Right.
That can catch your opponent off guard.
For sure. And look, Canada, they're not exactly invincible. I mean, they had their own injury scare, remember, earlier in the tournament when Shea Theodore went down?
Oh, that's right.
And don't forget, they didn't even have Pale Makar, their star defenseman, for that first game against the U.S.
That's right. They had to bring in Thomas Harley as a replacement.
Exactly.
So both teams have been dealing with some unexpected roster shakeups.
Exactly. It just goes to show that even at this level, in a best-on-best tournament, things can change in an instant.
And, it makes me wonder, right? If McAvoy can't go, how does Team USA adjust their defensive strategy? Who's going to step up and fill that void?
Well, one option could be Jake Sanderson. He's a young, talented defenseman. He saw some action against Sweden. He's got a ton of potential.
He does.
But, he just doesn't have McAvoy's experience, especially in high-pressure situations like this.
Absolutely.
And so without McAvoy's presence, his steadying presence on the blue line, it puts even more pressure on the other veteran defensemen, guys like Zach Werenski.
For sure.
They're going to have to log big minutes, make smart decisions with the puck, and be vocal leaders out there on the ice.
So you're saying it's not just about finding somebody to fill McAvoy's spot on the roster.
Right.
It's about finding somebody who can also replicate his leadership, replicate his impact on the game.
Exactly. And that's a tall order, especially with the limited options available this late in the tournament.
Right. And that brings us back to the question of whether Coach Sullivan decides to call up a replacement. I mean, it's a gamble either way, right?
Yeah.
You stick with the guys you have and hope they can rise to the occasion, or you bring in somebody new and risk disrupting that team chemistry.
It's a classic dilemma, right? Any coach in this situation, there's no easy answer. And whatever he decides to do could very well determine the outcome of this final.
So speaking of the players who are still healthy, I mean, this is their chance to really shine.
Oh, yeah.
Guys like Eichel, Gensel, Kreider, they're going to need to carry the load offensively.
Absolutely. And don't forget about Jack Hughes.
Oh, right, yeah.
He's been kind of quiet so far, but he's got the talent to break out and have a massive game.
This is their moment, right? To step up, prove themselves on the biggest stage, and maybe, just maybe, become the unlikely heroes of this whole thing.
Yeah. And it's not just about the stars either. A guy like Connor Garland, who's known for his energy and hustle, he could be a real difference maker in a game like this.
Yeah, it's often those unsung heroes, right?
Right.
The guys who might not get all the headlines, but they go out there and play their hearts out.
Exactly.
And they make those crucial plays that just swing the momentum.
It's all about everybody contributing, right? Everybody buying into the system, everybody believing that they can win.
Yeah.
And, that's where the mental side of the game really comes into play.
Yeah, we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to go a little bit deeper into the psychological aspect of all of this.
Sure.
Because this injury situation has got to be weighing heavily on these players.
Oh, absolutely. They're young, they're facing immense pressure, is playing against their biggest rival, and now they're dealing with all of this uncertainty and the potential for these key absences. I mean, it's just a recipe for distraction and self-doubt.
So how do you even begin to prepare mentally when you don't even know who's going to be out there on the ice with you? How do you stay focused amidst all of this chaos?
Well, that's where leadership comes in, both from the coaching staff, from the guys in the locker room. It's about fostering a culture of trust, resilience, a next man up mentality.
I'm glad you brought up the next man up mentality. Could you explain that a little bit more for our listener who might not be as familiar with hockey culture?
Sure. In hockey, next man up, it's more than just a saying, It's a way of life. It's about being ready to step into a bigger role at a moment's notice. It's about supporting your teammates no matter what. And it's about believing that the team's success is more important than any individual's role.
So instead of dwelling on who they're missing, they need to focus on who they are, what they can control, their effort, their communication, their execution.
Exactly. It's about shifting the mindset, right? From woe is us to we got this no matter what. And honestly, that can be a really powerful motivator.
It's kind of like that old saying.
What's that?
Adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it.
That's a great way to put it. This whole situation, it's a test of Team USA's character. Are they going to fold under prayer? Or are they going to rise to the occasion and show the world what they're really made of?
This is where we get to see the true heart of this team.
And, sometimes the most inspiring victories, they're the ones that come against all odds, right? This is their chance to write their own underdog story. Speaking of underdog stories, there's another layer to this whole thing that we haven't really talked about yet.
What's that?
The mental game.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I mean, you can't underestimate the psychological impact of all this. We're talking about a young team facing a ton of pressure, playing against their biggest rival on this huge stage.
Yeah.
And now they're dealing with all this uncertainty and the potential of losing some really key players.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to handle. And this kind of adversity, it can really test a team's mental fortitude.
Yeah, for sure.
You start questioning yourself, doubting your abilities.
Right.
Wondering if you can actually pull it off.
It's like they're facing two opponents, right?
Exactly.
Canada on the ice, and then their own anxieties in their heads.
That's a great way to put it. And that's where the coaching staff, they play a crucial role.
Right.
Coach Sullivan needs to be more than just a strategist, right? He needs to be a psychologist,
a
motivator, a leader who can help his players navigate this mental minefield.
So how do you do that? I mean, how do you prepare a team mentally when you don't even know who's going to be playing?
Well, first and foremost, it's all about a communication.
Right.
Being open and honest with the players about the situation.
Right.
Acknowledging their concerns. Yeah. Addressing them head on.
So no sugarcoating.
No sugarcoating, no false promises. Yeah. Just straight talk. And then it's about shifting the focus from what they can't control, the injuries, to what they can control.
Which is?
Their effort, their preparation, their execution.
So it's about empowering them.
Right.
Reminding them that they still have the ability to determine their own fate.
Exactly. And it's about fostering a culture of trust and resilience, that next man up mentality.
We talked about next man up earlier.
Right.
But could you kind of elaborate on how that applies to the mental game?
Yeah. In this context, next man up, it's not just about filling a spot on the roster. It's about stepping up mentally, embracing the challenge, believing that you're capable of rising to the occasion.
So instead of shrinking back in fear, they need to step forward with confidence?
Exactly. It's about turning that anxiety into fuel, that doubt into determination.
And sometimes playing with a chip on your shoulder, that underdog mentality, it can actually be kind of liberating.
It can.
You know what I mean? You got nothing to lose, so you just go out there, play with reckless abandon.
It frees you up. Take risks, be creative, surprise your opponent, and sometimes that's all it takes to swing the momentum in your favor.
Right. So while this whole injury situation for Team USA, it's not ideal.
Right.
It's not necessarily a death sentence for their chances in this final.
Not at all. It's an opportunity for other players to step up, for the team to demonstrate their resilience.
Yeah.
And maybe even for an underdog story to unfold right before our eyes.
I love that. It's a reminder that even when things look bleak, there's always hope. Always a chance to defy the odds.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And that's what makes sports so captivating, right?
It is.
It's not just about the physical competition. It's about the human drama.
That's about the stories.
The emotional roller coaster.
Right.
The triumph of the human spirit.
Beautifully said.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode of the Sports Breakdown. Be sure to tune in for our post-game analysis, where we'll break down all the action and discuss the implications of this final.
Until then, keep your sticks on the ice and your heads in the game.